Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Will she or won't she? For almost a month now, the world has been speculating whether US Speaker Nancy Pelosi will visit Taiwan. Tonight, the Taiwanese media has confirmed that Pelosi indeed will visit Taipei. She's going to Taiwan tomorrow, in fact, they say, on the 2nd of August. Pelosi will be traveling along with 5 American lawmakers. Now, Nancy Pelosi is third from the top in America's political hierarchy. She's always been hawkish on China, so her visit to Taiwan means nothing short of America openly picking sides. China could not be more aggravated. It has threatened to retaliate. Beijing's mouthpiece, the Global Times, says China is preparing for war. Drills have begun, airspace violations have begun. There's no ruling out that China could even intercept Pelosi's plane. Beijing is apparently keeping all options open. The US, on the other hand, is deploying ships near Taiwan. Pelosi's itinerary has been kept under wraps. There's no official word, no official confirmation. The next 24 hours are extremely critical. What happens in these next 24 hours has the potential to spark another war. On Gravitas tonight, we'll explore all possible scenarios. Today is Army Day in China, the 95th birthday of the People's Liberation Army. What you just saw was part of the celebrations. The PLA is celebrating its birthday by preparing for war. And they're declaring it in so many words. Look at this piece from the Global Times. The PLA is sending a message through Chinese state media, preparing for war. That's what it says. War against whom? The United States of America and their House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She started her tour of Asia and she will go to Taiwan as part of it. For Beijing, this is unacceptable, which explains the saber rattling, the drills, the threats, all of it. Despite everything, Pelosi is going. So what will China do? Will it launch a military response? Is the Biden administration prepared to risk that over a diplomatic visit? And if yes, why are they silent about Pelosi's plans? On Gravitas tonight, this is our cover story. Are we on the brink of another war? That's what we'll discuss. We'll start with Pelosi's plan, or what we know of it. She started her Asia tour today. First stop was Singapore. Will she go to Taiwan next? There's no word from her team, no mention of Taipei on her official plan. But by all accounts, she is going. Nancy Pelosi will land in Taiwan. There's a lot of buzz in Taipei. Preparations for her arrival are on. So when will she land? Tomorrow night, that is Tuesday. And the day after, she could meet Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen. Several hotels in downtown Taipei have been booked. This is for Pelosi's delegation. Of course, she's not traveling alone. There are 5 other Democratic lawmakers and diplomats, I'm sure. It is believed that they will be with her in Taiwan too. And let me repeat, Washington has not confirmed any of this. Taipei too has not said anything officially. Taiwan's foreign ministry was asked about these reports. It has refused to comment. They're all silent about Pelosi's Taiwan plans. Guess who's not? China. China issued new threats to the US today.
我们要 We would like to tell the United States once again that China is standing by and the Chinese People's Liberation Army will never sit idly by, and that China will take resolute responses and strong countermeasures to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. What the US should do is to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 Sino-US joint communiques, honor President Biden's pledge and not to support Taiwan independence and not to arrange Pelosi's visit to Taiwan.
China is standing by. The PLA won't sit idle. China will take strong countermeasures. This is not rhetoric. Beijing is not bluffing this time. It has plans in place if Nancy Pelosi goes to Taiwan. China will respond militarily. Its soldiers are already conducting drills. Reports say there's more in store. Beijing is said to have prepared a range of military options. An invasion of Taiwan is not on the cards right now, but China could strike militarily in other ways. And these are all tried and tested methods, like invading Taiwan's air defense zone. Chinese fighters have flown large sorties before. They could do it again, sending PLA jets to Taiwan. What are the other options? The Global Times has some ideas. China could declare air and maritime zones around Taiwan. This would create restriction zones around the islands. Then the Chinese military could be mobilized to conduct drills and display firepower. And I don't need to tell you what a security nightmare that will be for the US. Just imagine this. Nancy Pelosi is in Taipei and the Chinese military has surrounded Taiwan in the name of drills. It's the opposite of ideal. And it's already happening at some level. Over the weekend, the PLA got into action. They conducted a live-fire military exercise. It happened off the coast of the Fujian province in China. Now, Fujian is right opposite the island of Taiwan. The PLA has often conducted drills here in Fujian. And that's because of its strategic location. If China invades Taiwan, Fujian will be the launch pad. That's what most experts believe. These are all possibilities, though. And here's the worst-case scenario. The Chinese military sending fighter jets to intercept Nancy Pelosi's plane and to stop her from landing in Taipei. I know it sounds a bit extreme to launch an actual military operation just to stop Pelosi. But we won't put it past China. The US intelligence fears that this could happen. Even Pelosi was talking about it a few days back.
I think what the president was saying is maybe the military was afraid our plane would get shot down or something like that by the Chinese. I don't know exactly.
Nancy Pelosi was referring to a statement by US President Joe Biden. The US military had given an assessment to Biden. The generals were opposed to Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. They thought it was not a good idea. Well, it's happening now. So the US military has no option but to prepare. And just like Pelosi, they're executing their plans quietly. They've moved their assets closer to Taiwan. This includes US aircraft carriers and large planes. What for? Apparently to create a buffer zone. The idea is to secure the region for Pelosi's visit. Now, why do they need such elaborate arrangements? Nancy Pelosi, after all, is just a speaker. Why does she need so much security? It's because of her position in the US political hierarchy. In the American system, the speaker is third in the line of succession. So US President Joe Biden comes first, Vice President Kamala Harris is second, and Nancy Pelosi is third in line for the presidency. So if for some reason the top two are incapacitated, even if temporarily, then Nancy Pelosi will serve as the US president. So protecting her becomes a constitutional duty for the US armed forces. And the interesting part is they're doing all of it quietly. While China is making open threats, the US is hoping that Pelosi can land quietly. They can't even get themselves to declare the visit. At the same time, they don't want to be seen as backing off. More sly than superpower, we would say. Pelosi's visit was supposed to signal America's strength. It was supposed to show how the US will stand up to the threats from China. But this surreptitiousness betrays how nervous they are. We'll be tracking all of this. And speaking of shady trips, China is sending a military vessel to Sri Lanka. It's a lot like Nancy Pelosi's schedule. A lot of confusion, a lot of warnings. But now we have official confirmation. China's Yuan Wong 5 will dock at the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. When? around mid-August. The ship is expected to arrive on August 11th. It will stay there for 7 days, and on the 17th of August, it is expected to depart. That is the official schedule. Now, why is this voyage important? Because of two major reasons. Number one, Sri Lanka's reaction to it. At first, the Lankan government refused to admit that this visit was happening at all. Their defense ministry claimed to have no information about any port call. Days later, they made a U-turn. The ministry now says the ship will dock for fuel and replenishment. What does this U-turn indicate? A sort of hesitation. You see, China's loans have made it unpopular in Sri Lanka, so the new government in Colombo is keen to keep China at arm's length. That could be one reason for their flip-flop. Another reason is India, and that's factor number two. The Hambantota port is a strategic worry for India. It is less than 160 kilometers from the mainland, from India. In other words, a snooper's paradise. From Hambantota, you can spy on Indian vessels and ports. Is the Yuan Wong capable of that? Well, technically, yes, it is. The Yuan Wong is not your typical military vessel. It's not a gunboat or a carrier. It's a tracking ship. The Chinese government calls it a research vessel. It was built in 2007. It's almost 222 meters long. The Yuan Wong is involved in space and satellite tracking. Its range, almost 750 kilometers. 750 kilometers. With that range, China can snoop on Indian assets. And what does that include? Let me show you on a map. The nuclear power station at Kalpakkam, the atomic center at Kudankulam, the Southern Naval Command at Kochi, and 6 ports across southern India. No wonder the Indian government has raised the alarm. Their officials lodged a diplomatic protest in Colombo, and the Foreign Ministry released this statement. I have a copy with me. This is what it says. The Indian Foreign Ministry: the government carefully monitors any development having a bearing on India's security and economic interests and takes all necessary measures to safeguard them. So clearly, India is not happy. Reports say the Navy is on alert. They're tracking the Chinese ship as it sails to Hambantota. The question is, could there be more? In 2017, China secured a 99-year lease on Hambantota, and since then, their plan has been clear. Develop the port into a multi-purpose harbour, trade during the day, espionage by the night. It is part of China's grand plan to dominate the Indian Ocean. They have ports all over the region. Let me show you another map. The Dorale multi-purpose port in Djibouti, the Lamu port in Kenya, Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania, Gwadar in Pakistan, Karachi Deepwater Terminal also in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, Chittagong Port in Bangladesh, and Chokshu Port in Myanmar. All of these were made with Chinese money. Some of these are fully owned by China, others have a Chinese stake. This grand project is often called the String of Pearls. At least 17 ports are part of it, 17. All of them are located in the Indian Ocean region. Recently, this project had lost momentum. First, because of the pandemic, most countries shut their borders to foreign engagements. And second, because of financial troubles. After the pandemic, Chinese loans were becoming hard to repay. Countries realized the toxicity of Chinese debt. And third, Sri Lanka. The scenes in Colombo were a reality check for leaders across the world. They began rethinking Chinese loans. Having said that, Beijing is not giving up. This upcoming voyage to Hambantota is the perfect example. Just think about it. The Lankan people are not happy with China. Neither is the Lankan government. Yet they're hosting Chinese military vessels. Do you know why? Because of leverage. Sri Lanka still owes billions of dollars to China. They need China's help to get an IMF bailout. So the government has no option but to host the Chinese ship. And compare this to what happened in 2014. Sri Lanka allowed a Chinese nuclear-powered submarine in Colombo. This was in 2014. This was before the debt trap. This was also before the Hambantota debacle. Back then, Sri Lanka actually had the option of saying no to China. Instead, they bet on Chinese money and loans. They used China to counter India's influence, and look where it got them. As for India, this is a strategic dilemma. On the one hand, you cannot let China gain the upper hand. You cannot let them spy on southern Indian ports. But how do you do that? One option is to put pressure on the Sri Lankan government. The problem is that could backfire. India has spent $3.38 billion to help Sri Lanka. That money isn't just humanitarian aid, it is also supposed to buy political clout for New Delhi. If you push Colombo too hard, that clout may disappear. So both India and Sri Lanka have tough choices to make. Both sides played their cards wrong last time around. They let China make inroads into the island. This time, they will have to work in tandem to keep the dragon out. And then we have Pakistan. It has often been dubbed as the next Sri Lanka given the economic mess they're in. And now, just like Sri Lanka, Pakistan too is having trouble with China. Or the other way around. China is the one that's struggling here. All is not well between the Iron brothers. The strain is showing there are clear red flags. Let me tell you about the most obvious one. Beijing is yet to host Shehbaz Sharif. It's been 3 months since he took power, and since then, in the last 3 months, he's visited 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Turkey, but no bilateral visit to China. Isn't that strange? It is. And it's not entirely Sharif's fault. His predecessor, Imran Khan, is said to have miffed Beijing. So what did Imran Khan do? He ordered a review of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. And this happened soon after Imran Khan took power. He wanted a review. And that's when the relationship soured. Apparently, Islamabad was unhappy with Chinese investments. They had what you call buyer's remorse. Pakistani officials had doubts about Chinese investments. They felt that China overpromised and underdelivered. Among the sticking points are Chinese power producers. Pakistan owes a lot of money to these Chinese power companies, more than $1 billion in the month of May. Of course, Pakistan is unhappy. $1 billion is a lot of money to pay. Plus, Pakistan feels that it's an inflated bill, that Chinese companies are profiteering and overcharging. As per the deal, Chinese companies can only make a 15% profit from power, but the real profit margin is apparently anywhere between 50 to 70%. So Pakistan feels that it was fleeced and it's upset. Well, so is China, but for other reasons. China feels that Pakistan was a bad investment destination. They have 2 clear problems. Number 1 is mismanagement of projects. Number 2 is lack of coordination. So both sides are complaining. The all-weather friends now have a dysfunctional partnership. And both, may I add, are right in blaming the other for what they're blaming the other for. So much so that the Pakistani army is now stepping in to fix things. General Qamar Javed Bajwa made an intervention recently. The Chinese ambassador made a visit to Rawalpindi last week. A day before that, Chinese power companies met with Pakistan's finance minister. They demanded their dues from Islamabad. General Bajwa is said to be mediating to resolve this crisis, and it's in Pakistan's interest to do it quickly. You see, Pakistan has recently reached a bailout deal with the IMF, but the funds have not been released yet. Islamabad wants close to $1.2 billion immediately, and this is to avoid a debt default. But they've not got the money from the IMF. Why is the IMF not giving that money? Because of China. The IMF bailout comes with conditions. Pakistan has to renegotiate its power deals with China. Until that happens, there won't be a bailout. So Islamabad is racing against time. Its army chief has swung into action. He's talking to all stakeholders involved. He spoke to the Chinese ambassador. Last week, he also called Washington, D.C. He spoke to U.S. Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, Deputy Secretary of State. He made an appeal asking the U.S. to push the IMF and help Pakistan get close to $1.2 billion. Bajwa has been in touch with Pakistan's political leadership as well. He held a meeting with Prime Minister Sharif along with the finance minister. What did they discuss? The severe economic crisis and how to help the Pakistani rupee recover. So Pakistan's army chief is now serving as a diplomat and an economist. Will Beijing take General Bajwa seriously? You won't be surprised if they decide to cut their losses. Pakistan is deeply worried about defaults. It cannot risk going the Sri Lanka way. The consequences of bankruptcy will be dangerous. It could trigger a new political crisis. In fact, several countries are facing this situation. Iraq is one of them. A political impasse there has thrown the entire country into chaos. Over the weekend, the Iraqi parliament was stormed once again, but this time the protesters have refused to leave. They're making sweeping demands. from the political leadership. Our next report tells you more about the worsening situation in Iraq.
It happened once again. And this time, they have no plans to leave. The Iraqi parliament was stormed once again. Tall concrete barriers failed to stop these angry Iraqis. There was a heavy police presence, even tear gas, but the protesters overpowered everything that came in their way. Once they were inside, they made their intentions clear.
This is a message to the parliament members from the Iraqi people. It is over, the authority of this parliament is over, and the power is for the people, and people will decide the destiny.
We entered the parliament building for the third time to root out the corrupt political parties and militias. We are here to fix Iraq and get it back to its position by the word of people and with God's blessing in our leader, Muqtada al-Sadr.
Muqtada al-Sadr is the driving force behind this wave of protests. He hasn't visited the scene even once. But his supporters have crippled Iraq. They are determined. They will vacate the parliament only when their conditions are met. The protesters have lofty demands. They want early elections, sweeping constitutional amendments, and the ouster of al-Sadr's political rivals. The protesters are targeting what's called the Coordination Framework. This is an alliance of Shiite parties backed by Iran. It is led by former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. He wants pro-Iranian candidates to be installed in elite posts. Al-Maliki and his supporters have put their weight behind Mohammed Shia al-Sudani. He was nominated for premiership, but al-Sadr is determined to derail his rise. He first withdrew from the ruling coalition, then members of parliament from the al-Sadr camp resigned from parliament. But that wasn't enough. Al-Sadr is now waging a battle for power from the streets. His rivals are responding. The coordination framework has called for a counter-protest. The caretaker prime minister has issued an appeal to al-Sadr's supporters.
It is a very difficult time. It is the bitter truth, unfortunately. We all have to cooperate and stand together so we do not push ourselves into the abyss. We have to judge by our minds, our conscience and our sentiments and stick to Iraq and the Iraqis, not petty interests. I call on everyone to be patient, calm and rational, not being drawn to a clash. I call on citizens not to clash with security forces and to respect state institutions.
This is Iraq's longest political crisis in years. It has only increased the suffering of Iraqis. Hundreds have been hurt in the protests. 100 protesters and 25 members of the security forces suffered injuries over the weekend. Despite the crackdown, the protesters seem prepared for the long haul. They have set up tents outside the parliament. Their takeover has only raised the risk of a violent showdown. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
In Britain, governments are expendable, just ask Boris Johnson, but the monarchy is not. The royal family represents brand Britain, a small reminder of when a tiny island ruled the waves. We get the nostalgia. What we don't get is the obsession, especially after headlines like these. Take a look at this one. What does it say? Prince Charles slammed over $1.2 million charity donation from Osama bin Laden's family. In case you're wondering, yes, we're talking about the Osama bin Laden, one of the most dreaded terrorists in history. Prince Charles accepted a donation from his family. When was this? In 2013, almost 2 years after bin Laden was killed by US forces. Now, this report reveals some problematic details. 1, Prince Charles met with bin Laden's half-brother. 2, he overruled his advisors. Apparently, the royal advisors were against accepting the donation, but Prince Charles went ahead anyway. The family disputes these details. They say due process was followed. The Foreign Office was consulted. The charity's trustees were consulted. Only then was the donation accepted by Prince Charles. Basically, it was by the book. That's what they say. But this is not a question of rules or regulations. This is a question of optics. It's a question of propriety. The Bin Laden name is tainted all over the world. It'll forever be linked to terrorism. So why get mixed up with them in the first place? Here's what people close to Prince Charles say. And I'm quoting, "Though the name Bin Laden has a very unhappy history, the sins of the father should not be visited on the rest of the family, which is an eminent one in the region." We get the sentiment. You cannot control the actions of your relatives. Your father or brother does not define you. The Bin Ladens have repeatedly emphasized on this. They disowned Osama back in 1994. None of his relatives has any links to terror groups. Having said that, it still looks bad. The Bin Ladens are trying to launder their bad name, to expel the demons of Osama, and frankly, that's their choice. They're free to do as much charity as they want to. The question is, should Prince Charles have played along? Should a future king have helped launder Bin Laden's family name? Based on the public response, the answer is no. But then again, we are talking about the British monarchy. Their entire brand is built on not taking responsibility for their relatives, ancestors, cousins, brothers, it doesn't matter who. The British royal family never takes responsibility. So naturally, they had no problem with this donation. And Prince Charles is making a habit of it. Last month, he was accused of receiving suitcases full of cash from a former Qatari prime minister. How much money was in it? Almost $3 million. In February, another report emerged. Prince Charles's charity was offering knighthoods in exchange for donations. In both cases, Prince Charles got away. It seems he never directly is involved in these donations. Strange, considering the charity is called PWCF, the Prince of Wales's Charitable Fund. So he gets the credit, he gets the goodwill, he gets to cut the red ribbon, but when things go bad, he has zero accountability. Sums up the British monarchy. With each passing day, their brand is dimming. Let me tell you what happened in Australia. The head of state is still the Queen of England. So official matters are conducted in the Queen's name, like signing legislations or taking oaths of office. On Monday, one Australian lawmaker refused to do so. Her name is Lydia Thorpe. She belongs to Australia's Indigenous community. Listen to how she tweaked her parliamentary oath.
I, Sovereign Lydia Thorpe, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
You heard that. Instead of Queen Elizabeth, she said the colonising Queen Elizabeth. The Senate President was having none of it. He asked Lydia Thorpe to retake the pledge, and this time she said it as per the text. But it's clear that anti-monarchy sentiments are on the rise. Commonwealth countries are questioning the Queen's role, and why not? In 2022, people want to be citizens, not subjects. Also, the royal family is not exactly awe-inspiring. They're knee-deep in controversies. They refuse to disown their black sheep, and they make zero effort to redeem their family's problematic past. Well, that's not the case in Russia, though. Vladimir Putin is using his country's imperial past to rally the people. Sunday was a perfect example. It was the 31st of July, which is Navy Day in Russia. Its history is pretty interesting. The original Navy Day dates back to the late 1600s. It was established by the Tsars of Russia. 2 centuries later, in 1980, it was abolished by the Soviet Union. Vladimir Putin brought it back. In 2017, he reintroduced Navy Day through a presidential declaration. You can understand why. Putin is an admirer of Russian imperialist power. He's also a classic Cold Warrior, so celebrating a strong navy is on point for Putin. On Sunday, he arrived in the imperial capital of Russia, St. Petersburg. He oversaw a 2-hour-long naval drill on the Neva River. Dozens of warships and aircraft were on display. After inspecting them, Vladimir Putin delivered a short address. He did not mention Ukraine. But he did talk about dominating the Black Sea region.
We have openly outlined the boundaries and zones of Russia's national interests, both economic and vital strategic. First of all, these are our Arctic waters, the waters of the Black, Okhotsk and Bering Seas, as well as the Baltic and the Kuril Straits. We will ensure their protection firmly and by all means. The key here is the capabilities of the Navy. It's able to quickly respond to anyone who decides to encroach on our sovereignty and freedom.
How does Putin plan to do that? By upgrading the Navy. Once again, it is on point for the Russian president. He is an avid admirer of Peter the Great, the Russian monarch who founded Russia's Imperial Navy. On Sunday, Putin praised Peter the Great. At the same time, he announced some upgrades of his own. Hypersonic missiles.
It will suffice to mention the latest Zircon hypersonic missile systems that have no equal in the world, for which there are no barriers. Their delivery to the Russian armed forces will begin in the coming months. The frigate Admiral Gorshkov will be the first to take up combat duty with this formidable weapon on board.
Before inspecting his fleet, Putin signed a naval doctrine. 3 points stand out from this document. Number one, it singles out the United States as the biggest strategic threat to Russia. Number two, it identifies the Arctic as a new theatre of focus. And number three, it aims to make Russia a global maritime power. And for that, the doctrine hints at securing more foreign bases. Now, this doctrine reveals Vladimir Putin's thinking. The West believes that he's stuck in Ukraine. But the Russian president is clearly thinking about the long term. His naval doctrine talks about the Arctic, about foreign bases, about containing US influence. Doesn't sound like a leader who's stuck. At the same time, there was no mention of Ukraine. Why is that? Perhaps because the Black Sea Fleet has underperformed. On Sunday, a makeshift drone struck their headquarters in Sevastopol. At least 6 Russian soldiers were wounded. Reports say Ukrainian insurgents may have carried out this attack. Back in April, Russia's navy suffered another setback. Their missile cruiser, Moskva, was sunk by Ukraine. In the month of May, 2 assault boats were hit by Ukrainian drones. Do you see the trend here? 5 months on, Russia has not established naval supremacy. The Black Sea is still contested waters, and the result is this. Cargo ships are unable to sail through the region, especially ships carrying food grains. Russia and Ukraine export 33% of all wheat in the world. Most of this trade goes through the Black Sea, but since February, that trade has stopped. The world was staring at a major food emergency. Thankfully, last month, there was a breakthrough. Russia and Ukraine signed a deal to restart food grain exports. Today, the first ship set sail from Odessa. It was a Sierra Leone flag container called Razoni. It was carrying almost 26,000 tons of corn. On Tuesday, the ship will enter Turkish waters. It will be inspected by a team in Istanbul, and after that, it will sail for Beirut. The plan is to increase the shipments gradually. It will ease the pressure on grain importing countries like Egypt and Nigeria. Having said that, it's not a permanent solution. Such wartime agreements seldom last long. All it takes is one major escalation or one ill-timed statement, and this whole deal could fall apart. So the biggest priority is to end the war, not a temporary ceasefire, not a Black Sea trade deal, a negotiated settlement. But Putin's new naval doctrine suggests the opposite. He is fighting Ukraine. Yet he calls the US his biggest threat. Tells you what's on Vladimir Putin's mind. And staying with war and peace, while soldiers are regularly celebrated by their countries, the service of some silent warriors often goes unnoticed. Not in India. Over the weekend, India paid a tribute to a brave K9 soldier named Axel. He was 2 years old, killed in the line of duty. He was tracking down a terrorist in Kashmir's Baramulla district. Our next report brings you the story of Axel. It also tells you about other K9 soldiers of the Indian Army. But before you watch the report, we would like to advise viewer discretion. Certain images may be disturbing.
This is Axel. He was a K9 soldier, and all of 2. Axel belonged to the 26th Army Dog Unit. He was trained for assault operations. Axel was commissioned on one such operation on the 30th of July. A Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorist was holed up in a house in Kashmir's Baramulla district. There was a mosque just 10 meters from the house. The task before the Indian Armed Forces was to neutralize the terrorist while maintaining the sanctity of the mosque. Axel was pressed into action. He was sent to clear out the location. Axel did his job. He cleared one room, but when he entered the second, the terrorist opened fire. A bullet entered and left Axel's body. The terrorist was killed after an 8-hour-long gunfight. Axel's body was recovered after the operation. A post-mortem revealed that he sustained over 10 wounds. There was also a fracture on his femur. Axel was given a soldier's farewell. Tributes poured in for the brave canine through the weekend. Axel isn't the first canine to make the supreme sacrifice in the service of the land. The Indian Armed Forces have nearly 1,000 four-legged soldiers. There are various breeds: Belgian Malinois, Labrador, German Shepherds, Great Swiss Mountain Dogs, Cocker Spaniels, and Tibetan Mastiffs. Belgian Malinois are known for their stamina and agility. They are also intelligent and highly trainable. The armed forces train these four-legged soldiers for sniffing terrorist hideouts, sniffing bombs, finding evidence, guarding, detecting mines, even narcotics, tracking, and taking part in routine patrols. The canines are trained to recognize certain smells, like explosives. They bark and alert their handlers whenever they smell explosives. Meet Kanak. On the 6th of July, Kanak detected an IED. It was hidden on a highway in Baramulla. Kanak's discovery saved lives. This is the Remountain Veterinary Corps of the Indian Army. It is responsible for training canine soldiers. There is also the National Training Center for Dogs. A well-trained assault dog of the Indian Armed Forces is capable of tearing into a terrorist hideout and causing fatal injury. Canines trained by the Indian Army are reportedly in demand in friendly countries. In Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Cambodia, or South Africa. Many of these countries reportedly get their four-legged soldiers trained in India. In 2611, when Pakistani terrorists attacked Mumbai, 4 canine soldiers took charge of sniffing out hidden explosives. Max, Sultan, Tiger, and Caesar. These 4 friends were extremely well trained. Max sniffed out RDX. He was facilitated with a gold medal. Caesar sniffed out hand grenades. Meanwhile, Sultan and Tiger helped in bomb detection. The 4 friends retired in 2015. Max passed away a year later. And within 2 years, the other 3 died too. Today, the brave canines rest next to each other in Mumbai. Several canine soldiers of the Indian Armed Forces have won battle honors. 6-year-old Gracie and 8-year-old Daphne won the Chief of Army Staff's Commendation Card in 2018. The recognition entitled them to extra goodies and more rest. You will spot several of these brave soldiers looking sharp and marching down with their handlers during India's Republic Day parade.
And now let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
The first shipment of Ukrainian grain since the Russian invasion in February leaves the port of Odessa under a landmark deal to lift Moscow's naval blockade in the Black Sea. Sri Lanka issues an urgent appeal to tackle rapidly spreading malnutrition among children as its economic crisis leaves 9 out of 10 people dependent on state handouts. Authorities in southern Indian state of Kerala reported Asia's first possible monkeypox fatality after a man who recently returned from the UAE tested positive. The 22-year-old died in Kerala on the 30th of July. State government orders a high-level inquiry. The Philippines President Fernando Marcos has ruled out the country rejoining the International Criminal Court, whose prosecutor plans to resume an investigation into the previous government's bloody war on drugs. Death toll in Kentucky climbs to 28 as rescuers continue search operations in worsening weather conditions after devastating floods deluge parts of the state. New Zealand's borders fully reopened to visitors from around the world for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic that led to their closure in March 2020. New Zealand's borders started reopening in February this year, first for the country's residents. Saudi Arabia's year-on-year economic growth climbs by nearly 12% in the second quarter, boosted higher by spike in oil prices triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. K-pop sensations BTS may be allowed to continue performing even while they undergo their mandatory military service in South Korea, says the country's defense minister. The England women's team have claimed a maiden major title after beating Germany 2-1 in the final of the European Championship. Chloe Kelly scored the winner at Wembley against the old enemy. Celebrations have continued all over England after a monumental day for English football. Two-time Formula One world champion Fernando Alonso will race for Aston Martin from the 2023 season. 41-year-old Alonso has signed a multi-year contract with the British team. He will replace four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel, who will retire at the end of the season.
And our final story for this evening is about time. Time dictates our lives. When we wake up, when we go to work, when we return, we accommodate our day-to-day activities within the 24 hours we have. And it often feels like our days are getting shorter. Well, guess what? They are. Some of our days do not have a full 24 hours. Something unusual happened on the 29th of July. The Earth completed its rotation in less than 24 hours. Today, our world is spinning faster than usual. How will this change in the Earth's speed change our lives? Let's find out.
Something unusual happened on the 29th of July. Our Earth completed its rotation before time. 24 hours is what it ideally takes. Hence, every 24 hours, the clock resets itself, and every 24 hours, it is a new day. But on the 29th of July, the Earth took 1.59 milliseconds less to rotate on its axis. The day ended before time. It was a short day, but not the shortest on record. On the 19th of July 2020, the Earth completed its rotation 1.47 milliseconds before time. So this has been happening for some time. The Earth is spinning faster than usual. The obvious question is why? Scientists are offering a range of explanations, starting with climate change. They say the Earth may be spinning faster because the Earth's poles are becoming lighter. Again, why? Because of the melting glaciers. One study suggests that climate change has moved the North Pole eastwards. In the last 4 decades, the pole has moved by around 4 meters. Another theory points at seismic activity. It believes that the Earth's axis may have deviated because of what's happening below the Earth's surface. As we mentioned, the explanations vary. But what about the consequences? What happens when the Earth begins spinning faster? Confusion. You see, everything around us is set according to a 24-hour clock. From our smartphones to computers to satellites, software and GPS. The clock goes from 23:59:59 to 000000. When this cycle is broken, when Earth completes rotation by 23:59:58, experts could be forced to add a negative leap second, meaning our clock would skip a second. From 23:59:58, it would go straight to 000000. Who takes this call? The International Earth Rotation and Reference System Services, or IERS. It monitors the Earth's rotation and takes a call on adding or subtracting leap seconds. In 2012, it added a leap second to keep up with the pace of the Earth. Do you know what happened next? Social media sites crashed. Some faced hiccups. Losing even a second from a day could be a big deal. Bloomberg reports that every second, 1.4 million order messages are sent. Stocks worth $4.6 million are traded. Now imagine what would happen if we lose 1.59 milliseconds on a daily basis. Not a rosy picture, is it? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Chachila, para que haya buena solución. Bueno, pues Pachamamas, Ucamarquillimana Chachila.